like most startups, you have tight budgets, priorities pulling you in all different directions. As the chief revenue officer, how do you choose what to focus on?
Well, I think it first starts with strategy and staying on strategy for the company. And we set out at the very beginning to create this platform to connect buyers and sellers. And what we do is we constantly evaluate every new opportunity that comes into us from either maybe a client or from a partner who wants to do something new and unique. We look and we say, does that take us in that direction of our strategy and our strategic vision for the company? And it requires saying no a lot because you do only have so many people, and the most precious commodity is time.
Or not now.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, the most precious commodity for us is really our people's time, because that's the preponderance of what we spend our money on, is hiring great people. And so we want to make sure they're constantly contributing in a way that drives towards that focus, and that does require saying no sometimes, or it also requires saying not now. And I think we've gotten better at that. I think there are a lot of things that you can do when you're a startup. You're very nimble, you can execute very quickly, but really always asking yourself, does this ultimately contribute to that big idea? Because startups are really founded on big ideas. Google, eBay, you look at the great startups out there, they were founded on a big idea, and then they branched out from there once that big idea was set. And for startups to be successful, they have to focus on the single big idea, in order to really see if they can make it and sustain over time.
So you touched briefly on hiring. How do you build your dream team?
I think it's by finding a couple of things. People that understand and deep down in their core really believe in where you're going. When you're at a startup, you're typically changing something in the marketplace. You're creating an innovation that really people need to maybe change their thinking about, right? And if you think about what Quantcast does, we change the way people buy and sell media. And I think with that, right, that requires people who believe it so deeply that they can go out and evangelize, right? And they can really go out and take, right, every waking minute of their time, right, to spend time really pushing forward on that vision. And so we look first for that passion. There are kind of standards of, we hire smart people, we hire people, who have good, strong work ethics, et cetera. But I think it's the passion for the business that probably matters first and foremost. And then I think then after that, it's really knowledge of the space. When you're in a startup, that evangelizing requires credibility. It requires people, right, who can go out there and convince people that there's a new way to think. And so the next piece that we look for is does this person have credibility? Can they walk in and carry a conversation, no matter who they are, whether they're an engineer, whether they're a salesperson, but do they have credibility to represent the brand in the marketplace? And when people look at the company and say, that's a place where there's excellence happening, and we really hold that high bar. We don't ever want to compromise on that, because the minute you start compromising, you start slowing down productivity.
Of course. So your background, you started at Yahoo in '98, I believe, worked up to SVP of the Publisher Network. How did that position you for an executive role in your next step?
Well, I think a couple of things. I mean, one was Yahoo was great at building new businesses. There were a lot of interesting things that we did that were very leading of the marketplace, like building a yield management system, buying Overture, et cetera. There are all kinds of things that we did at that company to build that business up and take it from 300 million when I started to over 6 billion when I left. That is the first kind of start, as how that company was very good at providing those opportunities. But I would say the next kind of two things were, kind of simply, one is market credibility, right? Understanding and working with advertisers and publishers to solve problems is something that you build over time. It's not something that you all of a sudden just happens and you have that credibility. And I think Yahoo did a really good job, and by virtue of that, I benefited in being an executive there and leading some of that to really have that credibility in the marketplace with publishers and marketers.
It was such a growth period for that.
It was,
market.
Yeah.
The technology changed.
That's
methodologies.
Right. And it was constantly changing, because you went from basic sponsorship selling to, search entered the marketplace, you had rich media, then you had platforms and data, and there were all kinds of innovations happening during that period of time. So I think that was a big piece of it. And I think then Yahoo sits at the center of a lot of things that happen on the internet, from content to advertising, to premium services, et cetera. And that understanding of the marketplace, how the marketplace engages, what the pressure points are, how how the market really works, I think, was another piece of that understanding. I think it really did help, and I would recommend any person going through and building an early career being in a larger company so that you can see and learn those things, before you jump into a startup.
Right.
Because it's really helpful to have some of that in your in your back pocket.
So other than starting at like a Yahoo, Google, or Microsoft,
Yeah.
what other 3 big pieces of advice would you give to somebody starting a new company?
Well, I think it's first, we talked about the big idea. I mean, you really have to focus
Keeping
on.
core to the mission statement,
you have to
the
keep
vision.
core. You have to keep core to that mission statement. That is, if you start kind of varying off that, then I think you have a problem. Second thing is listening to the customer, right? So I think one thing that a lot of startups fail to do is they fail to balance the big idea against the customer and the market need. And so I think if you stay grounded to the customer, I think at Quantcast we've been very good at our executive staff, the founders, myself, Adam Gerber, we all are in the market frequently. I mean, every week, meeting with clients, publishers, and advertisers to be listening to what the market needs. And then we balance that against our vision of where and how we're building the company. And then I would say probably the final thing is it's really hiring great people. I mean, we talked about that earlier, but it is probably the most important thing at a startup. If you think about, besides having that strategic vision, it's the people that you hire in those first 3 years to 5 years are the people who are either going to build a business or not. And I think that is, just a core, is finding those right people. There's not a single formula. Like the people we're hiring at Quantcast are very different than the people we hired in the early days at Yahoo. There were some things that were the same, like the passion that I talked about earlier, but they're different people because we're trying to do something different than we were doing at Yahoo. And so I think you need to match the right people with ultimately the opportunity. And I think those are probably the major things that I would say, is that focus, the people, and then, any startup's going to take hard work. It's long hours, but I think that goes without saying.